Doc Ryan here. Today we built a tree fort. Isn't that cool? I mean, who doesn't love a tree fort? I mean, I just had a blast out there building this with the kids, and they were just so psyched. And you know, it doesn't matter if you're a kid or an adult, you just love your own private playground. And maybe that's because we were designed to live that way. Did you ever think about that? I want you to think about the garden. Remember how we were designed to kind of fellowship with God and heavenly beings and Adam and Eve, and then sin entered the world and the fall, and it was never the same after that. But that's kind of what God designed it to be like. It was like this amazing sense of working but also communing in the garden with Him. So what gets in the way? Well, I think most of us would say Satan gets in the way. And we've got the Bible that kind of is written in large part to tell us how to combat that. So before we do that, we kind of got to know what we're fighting against. So today I want to break down and talk about Satan and what we know about him. So first of all, we have to get something straight. Satan is not a proper name. It's a descriptive term. It means the accuser, the opposer, the adversary, the prosecuting attorney, as we see described in Job. In fact, every time the word Satan is used in Hebrew and Greek, it has the in front of it. So the more proper way of saying this descriptive word would actually be the Satan. Some say Satan's name was stripped away from him before he fell from heaven, or giving him a proper name may give him too much honor. Biblical authors, they never assign him the name. It's more of this mosaic, these identifying images that kind of tell us who Satan is. We see this come out in dragons and scorpions, and of course the term we're all used to is the devil, but that one's really interesting because, again, it's not proper, and we see the term the devil used to describe other ways that are sometimes descriptive of people, and so that's, you know, a gossiper, or maybe those who are just evil. But that makes sense, because who is Satan? He's one who tries to always steal things from God. He's always trying to be what God was. I mean, we know that in the beginning he was esteeming to steal God's throne, and that's what happened. So today when we see this, there's going to be a pattern that we go over where we see Satan constantly trying to look like God. Another thing that we could get from this is the reason the is in front of Satan is because there are other Satan types. Well, if you follow the divine council theology, you'll see that there are all these spiritual beings, some of which rule. If you watch the Melchizedek video I made, I kind of implied a lot of this, and sometime I'm just going to come right out and, say it all, but not yet. And so if you follow that theology, there's other divine people, and they kind of go bad like Satan does. So if you follow the 32 worldview, you're going to see the Tower of Babel being built, and not only are people falling there, but we also see a spiritual falling, possibly the divine council, as it's divided up and people go that way. So in that sense, you might have others that are evil in the terms of the devil, referred to that way, but there's one that is the father of all lies, and rather than giving him a title, the biblical authors might just choose to say the Satan. So it's kind of significant if you look at it that way. Now, my take on this is that when we are reading Adam and Eve partaking of the fruit and falling, we're also reading Satan falling at the same time. Now, not everybody believes that, and there's just not enough information out there to believe strongly one way or the other, but I think that makes more sense in putting theology together and kind of orchestrating how this all works together. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's actually kind of a twin fall. You see, you have humanity falling, and you also have Satan falling. So when we read this in Genesis, we see the Hebrew word seraphim come up. And you might be familiar with that word seraphim, but you didn't really understand it as the snake in the garden. So let's talk about that a little bit. The Hebrew word seraphim, Strong's would say means burning ones, but I'm going to say that's really not a very good translation, and unfortunately I find that problem with Strong a lot. But this word in Hebrew, seraph, it appears 8 times in the Hebrew Bible, and never once does it mean burning. So why does Strong's put this? Well, You know, if you study some of the other Babylonian, Ugaritic texts, things like that, there you'll also kind of see that word kind of used that way. So I think Strong probably did do some research and get that. But the idea is that when you get a snake bite, a venomous snake bite, I've never had one. My father was actually bit by a snake more than once, and it feels like you're burning. It's a burning sensation. So that's where that comes from. I've looked up many Hebrew dictionaries, and none of them say burning instead of snake. They all say snake. So the better translation definitely would be snake here. So seraphim was a flying snake. And when we think about angels, a lot of people think they fly around with wings and everything. And there's a good reason to believe that the seraphim were actually the only ones with wings, and they resembled snakes. But anyway, you'll wonder who they are. Well, they're similar to the cherubim. You might remember the cherubim surrounded the throne and guarded entrances to holy places. And that would make sense that the seraphim were there, and maybe they're, you know, some people think that Satan was in charge of the heavenly choir, or that, you know, he was kind of attorney up there. But we're not really sure. We don't have enough information to know those things for certain. But we do know that he was very close to God. Probably not like Michael and Gabriel, but probably kind of like a third tier. And so we see this, and he's close to God. He's close to the throne. We know that he was esteeming to sit in that throne of God. And then the fall happens, and he takes a third of the heavenly portion with him. Now, the snake in the garden is first introduced as a crafty beast of the field. Now, this is really important because it kind of goes with why I believe that we're probably reading the narrative that Satan fell in the garden. And so when it first starts out, it's describing him this way, and it's used in a positive reference. And we see that same word throughout Psalms and a little bit in Proverbs, talking about a shrewdness, and it's almost like interchangeable with the word wisdom. And so when we read about this, it comes off very positive. But by the end of the talk, it's saying not that he's shrewder than all the beasts, but he's cursed more than the beasts. So from this first part that he starts to the end, I kind of feel like we're witnessing the fall right there. Now, this next part, I want to take you to Isaiah 14. Isaiah 14 is kind of a very controversial verse. It describes this person of Babylon, and a lot of people think that it's actually describing the Satan in this passage. Now, I want to start out just by saying it might be. It's hard to tell here. So if you're reading it, it's definitely describing a person of Babylon, but could it also be describing Satan? That's the question that we have to look at. And so when we're in Isaiah 14, the first thing that you're going to find about it is that when you read the King James Version in Isaiah 14:12, we see the word Lucifer. And, you know, to everybody, if you say Lucifer, everybody automatically knows that that's Satan. Where did that come from? I don't know where that came from, because it's really interesting that in the Hebrew Bible, the word Lucifer isn't anywhere. In fact, the only time we see it is in the King James Bible, that one occurrence. And so as we read that, where does it happen? Well, I think early church leaders like Tertullian, or, you know, some of the others, they start to call him that. And this is many years later. Maybe it's an influence from Milton's Paradise Lost, where Satan is referred to as the great Lucifer. But that's not what the text says. So what does the text say? Why did the King James Bible interpret it that way, and Jerome in the Vulgate? Well, there's probably a good reason. The word there, the Hebrew word, is Hallel, and when you study this, it's actually Hallel ben Shafar. So this word comes from the Latin word Venus, and Venus was known for being this bright, shining star, and this is huge because there's a lot of heavenly bodies up there, and a lot of people think that the hosts up in heaven had some kind of connections, or maybe even were the stars. And so when you look at it this way, the word Lucifer means light-bearing one, and there might have been a reference there, but again, I don't want to talk too much about Lucifer. You see people go backwards because they try to explain what the name Lucifer means, but again, it's not in the Hebrew Bible, so let's just not go there. Let's not even use the name Lucifer. Let's just go with the Satan or the devil or something like that. I think that makes a lot more sense. I've also seen it incorrectly translated as the morning star, and that's the one that really cuts under my skin, because that's the term of Jesus. And some people, you know, get flustered here because they say, gosh, is there a correlation between Satan and Jesus? And the answer is no. Don't let yourself go down that road. There's nothing here that that signifies or even implies the morning star. The Hebrew words are similar, but there's no way that there's the same. So don't even open the door for that one. It doesn't mean the morning star here. Now, there is star theology going on. So, like I said, the holy ones up in the helms, there's this kind of talk that could be signifying. It might even tell us if this is Satan, something about that. But that's it. It's just a little glimmer, we might even say. Now, it's important to realize that sometimes the Bible addresses the Satan through the use within another person. And so we see this several times, but one example is in Ezekiel 28, the first of the part of the chapter talks about the prince of Tyre, who's the human rulers, where the next section is spoken to the king of Tyre, and many would say that this is a reference to Satan working through the prince of Tyre. And oftentimes people get hung up with this because they say, well, is the devil actually taking the form? Well, we talk about demon possession. You talk about, there were spiritual bodies that walked with men and looked like men and performed similar ways, and there's a lot on that out there if you want to, but yes, the devil could be within somebody else at that time. So here's some other things that you have to kind of look at if you're going to go down this. First, the wicked tyrant of Isaiah 14 is most likely Sennacherib. So we look at that, and we know that in 689 he was overthrown and kind of suffered a humiliating defeat, and so it would seem to be very similar. Now, okay, you say, well, that can't be because he wasn't the king of Babylon. Well, actually, Sennacherib and several others kind of held this honorary title, so that would make sense that way too. And so the tyrant of Isaiah 14 had been judged and no longer shakes kingdoms or threatens the earth. And Satan, the god of this world, we know is alive and well. So that's a little problematic, and we have to sort that one out. And that's why I kind of say it's a man, but there's also a Satan typology going on here. There is adequate scriptures and other places to support Satan's fall and his pride that we really don't need Isaiah 14 here. So if we threw it out, I'm not sure that we really learn much that we need to know about Satan. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, we really don't need this text, but still it's interesting. So, Isaiah 14 and Revelations 20 seem to kind of make sense. They flush out together that way. Now, I don't necessarily want to get caught up in all this. The important thing is that we know who Satan is. And so who is he? Well, we know there is no truth in him. John 8. He's the father of lies. He's the deceiver of the world. He's the ruler of this earthly world. Now, that's the one that just scares me to death. That's the one that, like, I have little boys and I get worried about him because I know that he's here, he's alive, and there's a spiritual battle, a fight going on for my soul, for my boys' souls. And so when I see that he's ruling here and I'm living as an alien, the Bible says, in his kingdom on earth here, I can't wait until we get to God's kingdom. So I got to bring this to a close. The bugs are getting bad out here, but I've got some buddies that fought in Afghanistan, and you ask them what the hardest part of the battle was, and they would tell you, not knowing who or what they were fighting against, they just knew it was evil. And that's a lot like, I think, most of our spiritual battles right now, is most of us are in this war, and we kind of just feel like we're fighting against evil, and we're trying just to get through, but we haven't identified the source. And my ranger buddies over in Afghanistan, they would spend so much time trying to infiltrate and get wisdom about who they were fighting so that they could be victorious and defeat the adversary. And today, that's where I want to encourage you, is we've been given the Bible, which is kind of this great map of how to get through this life, and it talks about this immense spiritual battle that we're in against the adversary, the Satan, and we need to find out how we can be victorious in this fight. So I hope that you join me and that you do your reconnaissance mission so far, and as we do that, I think that we'll be victorious over Satan because Jesus won. Jesus paid the price on the cross. We know we're victorious, but we're working it out. May God bless you and keep you.